Okay, so my name's Frankie Everett. I'm the financial aid director here. I've had several people contact me in regards to student loans because it's kind of been a big thing, and I know that some people from the controller's office have sent emails about it. So I figured it'd just be easier to put everybody in the same room, give you the right information, let you ask for questions, and hopefully get everybody on the same page with how to work your loan forgiveness. So if you don't know what it is, basically the government, Congress, so we always say it's an act of Congress. A lot of times it is for financial aid. It is an act of Congress. They passed some loan forgiveness rules several years ago where if you work in public service for 10 years and make 120 on-time payments for those 10 years, any balance can be forgiven. So that's where we're at now, as that was back in 2007. So 2017 is the first time that anybody can actually get their loans forgiven. So basically, to qualify for loan forgiveness, you have to make 120 qualifying payments on direct loans, and I'll explain each piece of this chart. No, I don't want to do that. Okay. In a qualifying repayment plan, while you work for a qualified employer, while you are receiving public service loan forgiveness. And then anything that is forgiven will not be taxable when it's forgiven. And I'm saying that because there's also an ability to get your loan balance forgiven after 25 years of on-time payments, okay? But anything after those 25 years are included in your taxes. So through the public service loan forgiveness, the balance is not taxed, but if you did the 25 years of payments, that balance is taxed. So the first part, 120 on-time or qualifying payments. Like I said, this whole public service loan forgiveness started in 2007. So it was only payments after 2007 that are counted. You have to make them on time. So don't show me again. You have to make the payments on time. So you can't be in default on the loan. So usually when you're in default, you have to make like 6 on-time payments to get out of default. That still means that those 6 payments you're in default, so those wouldn't count towards your 10 years of payments. You have to make them on time. So within 15 days is still considered on time. If your payment is due the first of the month, as long as you make it within 15 days, it's still considered on time for your lender. Must be made each month, and like I said, not in default status. So one thing that happens several times is we'll have students or former students who have a loan forgiveness or a loan income-based repayment plan where they don't make enough money to even need it to make a payment every month. So they might have a 0 payment under the income-driven repayment plan. If you have a 0 payment for that month, it still counts as a payment because you're on an income-based repayment plan. You have a 0 due. That still counts if you meet all 5 of those arrows. Okay. However, if you make a lump sum payment, like some people will get, grandma will send them $500 and they just make a payment. It may count for that one monthly payment if that's used for your monthly payment, but it doesn't count as an additional payment. Hopefully that makes sense. Payments have to be made when you're not in default status. If you have, like some people, we get paid bi-weekly. So if you do a partial payment, you pay half of your $300 payments. You pay $150 at the first of the month, $150 at the 15th of the month. So that's your $300 payment. That doesn't count as 2 separate payments. That's your 1 payment for that month. Okay. Payments made when they're not required. So like I said, grandma sends you money. Those don't qualify unless that's counted as your payment. And then lump sum payments don't count unless that's your payment. So there's different kinds of loans, and this is where everybody has been caught up on. This started way back in 2007, but the guidance on public service loan forgiveness hasn't been very clear. But what has happened is you have to be on a direct loan payments. So you have to be in a direct loan consolidation loan, or you have to have taken out direct loans. Okay, that is different than the people that have that were in school over 10 years ago and had the FELP loans, the Federal Family Education Loan Program, and those ones are not considered direct loans, because those were ones that you did a promissory note directly with Sallie Mae or Nelnet or Wells Fargo. And so those aren't direct loans, those are the FELP loan program. So if you are under that loan program and you made payments, those actually don't count towards your 10 years of on-time payments. You have to be on a direct loan consolidation loan, or have taken those loans once the government took over all the loans and they just have servicers. So you might still have Sallie Mae or Navient or something like that, but the loan is through the direct loan program through the government. And you have a servicer that collects payments on behalf of the government. So that is the direct loan program. In a qualifying repayment plan. So there's several, you might have heard of these. There's different ones. There's income-based repayments, the most popular one, because that's what we use for the FELP program, and also you can use for direct loans. There's repay, pay, and income contingent repayment plans. Basically, as long as you're not on the standard plan, you can qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And it's only because if you're on the standard 10-year plan, there's nothing to forgive after 10 years. If you do the standard payments for 10 years, there's nothing to forgive. So you have to be on an income-based repayment plan in order to qualify for forgiveness. Most payment plans have two formulas. So I'm just kind of putting this out here. When you do the income-driven repayment plan application, you can actually check the box to give me whichever one gives me the lowest payment. Okay, so you don't actually have to know this stuff, but this is how it's calculated. You can either, most people, like I said, are on like income-based repayment or the pay or repay plan because they are lower. Like most people don't want to pay more in loans. So, you know, somebody that has, say, like $50,000 in loan debt, they have a family of like 4, they might have a payment of like $250, something like that. So the third step is where you work, okay? It's not what you do at ULM. It's that ULM writes your check, okay? ULM is a government university, so we are government employees. ULM writes our check. It doesn't matter if you are a police officer. It doesn't matter if you're an assistant, if you're an instructor. As long as you get paid by ULM, you're a government employee. And so if you meet those other criteria, you're on a direct loan program, you're on an income-based repayment plan for 10 years of on-time payments, as long as your check is from a government employment situation. So some people work at multiple universities or work part-time at a hospital and part-time at ULM. As long as you work for qualified employers, those payments would count if you've met all the other criteria. And there's some information on how to qualify. So for full-time employment, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program considers full-time to be whatever's greater of what your employer considers full-time or 30 hours per week. So, and I'm not sure what ULM's is. I think 30 hours is our full-time for like benefit purposes. So I think that it doesn't matter, it's just 30 hours per week. But like I said, if you have multiple jobs, if you work at the hospital and you work in the nursing program here, you'd have to do a public service loan forgiveness application for both employers. But the PSLF program, FEDLOAN is the servicer for it, they will look at both and combine them. And then any time that you take off for vacation or FEMLA, whatever, that still counts as employment time. So they don't calculate how many days off you took during the year unless you didn't get paid for some reason and it didn't count. The other thing to note, and I'm not sure how many people we would have that would qualify under this, but because of like separation of church and state and things like that, if you are doing religious instruction or proselytizing in any way, those hours don't count. So I don't know if anybody in the room is affected by that, but those hours wouldn't count. So when you're applying for and receiving public service loan forgiveness, what should you do? Basically, you need to determine if your loans are eligible, okay, and consolidate any ineligible loans. Now, I know that there are some people that maybe started in one program several years ago, so they have those FELP loans and maybe consolidated those and have made payments on those, and then they went back to school, you know, 10 years later to work on an advanced degree. So you have direct loans and you have FELP loans. You can combine them both. Even if you consolidate under direct loans, the only thing I would caution you of is that if you had direct loans that you're already making payments on and you reconsolidate, you sign a new promissory note, anything you did under your previous promissory note that were on-time payments in a qualifying program while you worked at a qualifying employer, those will no longer count unless they change the policies on this. This is the guidance we were given, is that if you make payments previously and you reconsolidate with a new promissory note, anything previous doesn't count anymore. So make sure, I will give you the phone number as well for FEDLOAN, because honestly, you can ask me questions all you want, but what I would really do for you is call them directly, because they record every phone call. You can write it down that you spoke to this employee number 65759 and they told you this, and they can pull that call and know that you were given that information. Okay, so I'm trying to help here, but I would really recommend you contact FEDLOAN directly, because they're the ones that have the market on this. They're the only servicer doing public service loan forgiveness. So if there's anybody, you know, straight from the horse's mouth, talk to them and know for sure what you need to do for your loans. We've been told, though, that if you had prior loans, you do a reconsolidation, you sign a new promissory note, anything you did doesn't count anymore. So make sure that you ask that question if you're in that situation. And then, like I said, complete an employment certification form for each employer. So if you worked at multiple places, we have like teachers. For example, my husband teaches. He switched schools this last year, so he would need to fill out an ECF for West Washita, and now this year he has to complete one for Caldwell. That's where he's transferred to. So you have to do it each year, so every year and every employer if you're still working there. So if you still continue to work there, continue to fill that out. So this is the website, studentloans.gov/repay. This website will help you determine what to do, okay? And this is probably one of the most straightforward links you'll ever get from the government, okay? From the government. This is what it brings you to. It says, here, look at it. It's studentloans.gov/repay. So this is what will come up on that screen. Do you have federal loans? You answer the question. Hopefully you say yes, because you're here. And then it'll ask like up to 5 more questions. So what's your, like, do you work for the government? Do you work for a company that's a 501c3? Are you working in religious instruction? That kind of stuff. It'll ask you those questions, and then it'll come up to the screen that says, you should consider these things, okay? And it'll tell you what you need, and it'll tell you the steps. You just click see all steps, print that page, and it'll tell you exactly what to do, okay? If you don't have an FSA ID, that's a Federal Student Aid ID, make sure you apply for one, because all of these websites use that login information. Make sure you write it down, what your ID number is, or your email address that you use, because some people use their university address or they'll use their personal. I would recommend using your personal one only because you never know if you're going to continue to work at ULM or have another opportunity. And you want to be able to have access to this FSA ID forever. And if you use ULM and you don't work here anymore, you're not going to be able to access it anymore. The other recommendation I have is if you set up your FSA ID and it asks you when you set it up if you want to hook a phone number to it for texting, I recommend doing that, because I go to high schools in the area and help people fill out their FAFSA, because Louisiana is requiring a FAFSA now for high school graduation. I have parents that don't have the phone number anymore. that they had set it up with their previous kid 4 years ago. So they don't have the phone anymore. They don't have the email. They can't remember what email address they used. But if you use this, if you have the same cell phone, you click to send a security code. You don't have to answer those security questions. Okay, those security questions. I had one lady that said, "How old is your youngest son?" Well, she doesn't remember when she set up that question, so she doesn't know that he was 15 or 16 at the time. Okay, and when you set up those questions, it doesn't let you put in numbers, so she couldn't even put in 17 for 17. She had to type out 17. Okay, so pick things that are definitely something you will remember. Your son's middle name, your mom's maiden name, because there's some where you type in a question and it's not the stock questions that they give you. One lady, I told her, I said, you know what? Jesus is always the answer. Just every single question, write Jesus. Then at least you only have to remember one answer. You know? I mean, this lady couldn't remember her password. She couldn't remember her email address. I mean, I helped her set up her new password. I'm like, Candyland123, you know? And then every single answer, we put Jesus on there because I wanted her to remember. She only had to remember one answer for all 5 questions there, you know? So that kind of stuff. And write it down and put it in, like if you have a file cabinet where you put your taxes every year, the FSA ID doesn't change. You have to use it every year. If you're going to do this repayment plan and you're going to do loan forgiveness, you're going to need that password every year. So it's just like taxes. You're going to need it every year. Just put it somewhere where you're going to see it every year. Or just email it to yourself. Like I have some stock passwords I use, so I'll email it to myself. Like if I lock myself out, which I do almost every day around here because I have so many passwords, I email to myself, you know, like F, you know, star, exclamation point, star, you know, like, oh, okay, I know what that one is, you know. So nobody else sees it, but I know, oh, it started with that, oh, it's probably this one. So, I know. Those of us that have 40,000 passwords, you just have to figure it out that way. Okay, so when you want to, if you have FELP loans, so those loans from prior to 2007, or if you have new loans and you want to reconsolidate, this is the website you go to consolidate your loans into a direct loan consolidation loan. Okay, studentloans.gov. So it just looked like the other one, that's the /repay, studentloans.gov. This is a federal website, and then you just click complete a consolidation loan application and promissory note, and it'll take you through it. Also on here to note, anybody who is married, co-sign spouse's income-driven repayment plan. When you or your spouse consolidate, it looks at the income for both if you filed married, filing jointly. And so your spouse has to actually confirm that the information you put on there is correct. And so they need their own FSA ID, which, by the way, has to be its own email address too. So you and your spouse can't use the same email for the same FSA, for 2 different FSA IDs. So just keep that in mind. And they have to go in and sign the promissory note with you, or not the promissory note, but the income-driven repayment application, okay, and the PSLF form. So what will happen is at the end, when you fill out your income-driven repayment plan, it'll tell you at the very end, you put your spouse on here, and it'll give you a 6-digit code, and it's like in a little box, so you know what it looks like. And then your spouse has to go into studentloans.gov, click on that co-signed spouse's IDR payment plan request, and then they have to have that 6-digit code so that they can sign it too. Okay, my FEDLOAN, like I said, there's only one servicer that does the public service loan forgiveness. That's FEDLOAN, okay? And I'm telling you this because if you click on that link to complete a consolidation loan application, it'll actually give you an option for like 5 or 6 different servicers for your direct loan consolidation loan. If you pick any of them besides FEDLOAN, you can't do the public service loan forgiveness because you have to pick FEDLOAN for that one, okay? Now, you can consolidate, like you could accidentally click Nelnet, but you'd have to call FEDLOAN and tell them, I did a direct consolidation loan, I filled out a public service loan forgiveness, and if they can approve it within like 90 days, they can transfer your loans from Nelnet to FEDLOAN. Okay, so but make sure you just use FEDLOAN. Oops. Yes, make sure you just use FEDLOAN, because then that way it's where it needs to be so that you can do your 10 years of on-time payments. So you'll get a notification, especially if you put an email address, which I think now you have to put email addresses on all these. You'll get an email saying your direct consolidation loan has been approved. Okay, and then you will also get something in the mail saying your direct consolidation loan has been approved. So then you'll go to the FEDLOAN website and create an account. Okay, you'll also be asked if you want to set up direct debit and all that kind of stuff. So you have to go in and create an account. And then, like I said, on those little arrows, you have to be in a direct loan program, and you have to be in a qualifying income-driven repayment plan. So when you log into FEDLOAN to set up your account, also go ahead and apply for your income-driven repayment plan at the same time, so you can go ahead and get the clock starting on being on a proper plan. Okay? So this is what the form looks like. I did not print copies, and the reason why is because they have form fillable ones online, and it would be easier for you to go on there and print it yourself after you've filled it all in, so that you don't have to worry about them saying that they couldn't read your handwriting. So the form is fillable online. If you go to myfedloan.org/PSLF or studentaid.gov. And they actually have an online application where you can submit it online now too. So you don't even have to print it and mail it. However, I'm not sure how they are handling, because this is very new, I'm not sure how they're handling the employer certification section, because obviously you can't submit it if you don't have your employer signing it for you. So this is what most of these forms look like. It looks like this. And just so you know, make sure you keep an eye on the top of the thing, because it says public service loan forgiveness. The income-driven repayment plan forms look exactly the same, but it says something else at the top. Okay, so make sure you know which one you're submitting, because you have to do both every single year. Income-driven repayment plan, public service loan forgiveness. And then when you fill out the employer section, if you don't know what to put in there, like I filled in most of this just so you see it, but on your W-2, this is what I copied over there. So that way there's no question on it. Make sure that whoever fills out the employer section, which we'll get on the next screen, is an authorized official. We'll talk about that in a minute. Make sure you fill in everything, because a lot of these forms get rejected simply because somebody didn't fill it out completely. And they won't call and tell you, hey, you forgot to fill in number 14. They just go on to the next person. Okay? So not only should you fill it out correctly, but keep a copy of it. Okay? If you keep a copy of it and you don't hear from them, so you call FEDLOAN and you say, I turned in my form on January 10th, 2018, and I haven't heard back, they can say, well, we never received it. You have a copy, you can fax them another one. Okay, authorized official. I put Melissa on here, but pretty much anybody, you know, like there's a lot of movement in our campus on who works where, and new directors and new, you know, people everywhere. So probably the safest thing is have somebody in HR complete the employer section, just because they will know the date of your hire, that you are full-time. You know, your boss can know that you work at least 40 hours a week, but they might not know the exact date that you were hired. So I would contact HR to have them fill out this section, and they're really good about getting it done. Okay, so once you fill out that form, you submit it to FEDLOAN. You can fax it, you can mail it. You know, I would go ahead and fax it and then wait a week and call them and say, did you receive my form? Okay. They determine if you qualify, if all your payments qualify. They determine if your employer is a qualifying employer, so you're in a government job or a 501(c)(3) job, you're not doing religious instruction, that kind of stuff. They check all of that, and then they make sure that, like I said, if you accidentally consolidate with and use the wrong servicer, they'll help you get those transferred to FEDLOAN, since they're the only ones that will do this. And then they let you know what payments you're going to make. And then every year, that yellow box right here, borrower submits another employment certification form every year. So this is my recommendation for you. If you have like Gmail, a Google Calendar or something, put a reminder on your calendar every year, like a month before it's due, to remind yourself to do it. Because if you have a gap in there, you're going to have a payment that doesn't count. And I know one payment's not that big of a deal, but in 10 years, you're going to wish you didn't have another payment because you're going to have less deductions. Your kids are going to be out of school, so you're going to have less people in your household. Your payments are going to be higher at that point in time. So you're going to want to make sure that every payment you make is going to count.
Right.
Yes.
Do payments not count before you fill out this form?
The payments, the question is, do the payments that you fill out or that you make before this form, do they count? The FEDLOAN will look at your previous payments and let you know what ones will count. So if you have been making payments on a direct consolidation loan and you were working full-time at a qualifying employer, making on-time payments within 15 days and not in default, they will count those payments. Okay, and there's actually a slide on this we'll get to in a minute about you can actually track how many payments they've counted. So, and that's another thing is that there's some people that have waited till 7 years later to actually do their paperwork. They recommend doing it every year so that you don't have to go back and get signatures from employers from 5 years ago to say that you were working full-time in their business. Yes, ma'am.
A follow-up to that, if you've got these, let's say you've got a year's worth of direct loan consolidation that do qualify, but you mentioned that we have to consolidate it into the Fed loans. Does that not negate those that you said?
It would. If the question is, if you have previous direct loans that you've already been paying on, and then you consolidate into a new direct loan, then it would negate those payments. So what you would do, since they're already direct loans, they're already getting payments that count. If you have to consolidate any other debt, I would not include those because then those won't count. You don't have to consolidate every loan. Like you can take out one loan and say, hey, I just want to pay this one. No, I don't know why anybody would, except in this situation, because the downside is that means you have two different loans to pay on. So the point of consolidation is to have one payment to one place every month. So if you have ones that are already qualifying for the loan forgiveness, I wouldn't include those. I'd leave them where they're at so that those payments still count. But I would also ask FEDLOAN, I'd call them and say, I have these other loans. If I consolidate them so I can have one payment, am I going to miss out on those qualifying payments? And ask them because they are still learning through this. Like I said, this is the first couple months that people might qualify for loan forgiveness. So a lot of times they give us guidance, but they still don't know all the rules yet. So right now they've said if you reconsolidate those payments won't count, but it's possible because they've had so many issues. Somebody had sent me an email said they weren't going to be able to make it. There was an article that came out the other day because somebody was suing Navient, I think it was, because they were told that they were making payments that qualified, but never told that person to consolidate into direct loans. So they were making FELP loan payments for the last 12 years. And none of those payments qualify because they're not a direct loan. So there's people that are suing loan companies right now because they were misinformed.
So if you've been, so mine are direct consolidated through Navient. I have to switch them over to FEDLOAN. And so will those payments that have been made to Navient for 3 years?
You'd have to, if you have Navient and you have to switch to FEDLOAN, I would contact FEDLOAN because there's a possibility that they've said that any of those direct loan payments can still qualify if you switch them into FEDLOAN. But like I said, they're still working through the little kinks since we've only had a handful of people at this point that qualify for loan forgiveness. So they're still trying to figure out how this works, and that was 2 presidencies ago, too.
So just call FEDLOAN and tell them to get those loans from Navient.
Yeah, to say that you are trying to do public service loan forgiveness, and you have loans in direct loans with Navient. How do you make sure those payments will continue to count? That's what you need to tell them. Okay? So like I said, common issues, if you leave something blank, you don't fill it out completely, they'll just throw out the form, and they won't tell you that they threw out the form. So make sure you fill it out completely. Missing fields, it's, sometimes you'll skip through and you're like, oh, I work at ULM. Oh, I don't remember what the EIN is. So I'll get back to that later, and then you forget to get back to it later. So you never fill in that tax ID number for the school. So then that will get thrown out because of it too. You must submit the employment certification form annually to make sure that those payments will update on the payment website, which I'll get to it in a minute. The payments, like I said, we've been told they're going to try to count those previous loans that were not with FEDLOAN, but I'd make sure you say it on the phone when it's recorded, okay? Say it on the phone. You don't know how many. I've actually had to contact the Better Business Bureau a couple weeks ago about a business that I was working with, and they pulled the phone call and they said, oh, you were misinformed, okay? Make sure you call, you keep a log, like a notebook that you keep with like the FSA ID information, so you know what date you called, what the employee number is of the person you spoke with, what phone number you called, because sometimes these companies have several different phone numbers. Make sure you got to the right department and were told by a specific person on what happened, so then they can track it on their end. And a lot of times they'll just fix it. Okay, so this is just a chart of, I'll get to in just a second, of employers. So a lot of government employees are qualifying. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters where you work. So as long as you're working in a government job, no matter what you're doing, you can still make your, count those loan payments for your forgiveness. Did you have a question?
Yeah, and it may be something that I need to call them about, but like I have two different, for my master's and my PhD, so I'm paying on two different loans.
Mm-hmm.
And we had consolidated one set of them just recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so if these over here would maybe end up qualifying, and I consolidate them into 10 loans.
How long ago do you consolidate?
6 months maybe.
Okay. They might be able to just transfer them in, because I know there's a certain, it's like either 90 days or 120 days
Mm-hmm.
where you have the freedom to add loans in. Like if you accidentally forgot to include one, you have a grace period to continue to add things to it.
Okay. Because let's say hypothetically those that I consolidated, will those start over? And, But I've got these that have been here for over a year that those will qualify.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to bring them all together,
I do see that, and what would happen, like say you kept them separate, the loan that you've been making payments on, that balance will get forgiven 10 months earlier than the rest of it.
Right, but if I try to put them all together, it might screw it all up.
It possibly can. That's why you should contact FEDLOAN and ask them specifically about that. Okay, so like I said, of the ones that are processed, 1.8 million applications have already been submitted according to FEDLOAN last year, and 66% were approved, 34% were denied, and the reasons were mostly missing information, like people just didn't fill out the form right. So make sure that if you fill out the form, you read every single letter and word in there, make sure it's filled out correctly. Have somebody double check it, make sure you did it right, and then a week or two after you submit it, call them and make sure they received it. Okay? Yes, sir.
On this online form, is it one of these where you have to sit for 3 hours and fill it out completely, or you'll lose it and you have to go back, or what do you say?
This is the form.
Okay,
It's 2 pages.
that's all, because I've been on there and the
The
packet to read is.
I mean, it has like 4 or 5 pages attached to this, but this is the form itself to fill out. And then, like I said, though, you have to do the income-driven repayment plan too, which is a little more. It's the same size as 2 pages, but you have to actually submit your tax information with that. So your income-driven repayment won't calculate until they get your tax information and your spouse signs it if you have a spouse. So make sure that that's all completed. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that they told me when we did that consolidation, they had to see, and we file our taxes together, they had to see that, but I could send a check stub, and they based it only on my income as far as
They
the
did?
Yes.
They did that the first time for me, and then the next year they came back and they were like, yeah, we screwed that up, so we're gonna have to.
Yeah, actually,
They
there's.
done them together, which I would much rather be based on just mine.
Yeah, that, because I was concerned about that, and she did it.
Well, there's actually, they don't, depending on your financial situation, they might not actually need your spouse information. They'll ask for it every time, no matter what,
Right.
even if they don't use it in the calculation. Okay? So make sure that your spouse goes into studentloans.gov, clicks on the cosign my spouse's income-driven repayment plan, puts in the 6-digit code. The other nice thing right now is that we do have something called a IRS data retrieval tool, where the government, the FSA, Federal Student Aid, will link to the IRS and pull your tax information for you so that you don't have to submit paper copies. Okay? And so all that you have to do for that is log into studentloans.gov, and it will ask what your AGI was on your taxes. So it just make sure that you logged in securely and you know something about your taxes. So you're confirming the AGI that you actually submitted on your taxes, and it'll let it link so you don't actually submit paper copies.
Yeah, I didn't have to do the tax form, just had to send my, an updated check stub.
Right, and so there are situations like if it'll ask you if your financial situation has changed. I think it's on the second page. No, it's not on this one. But on the one that looks like this, but it's the income-driven repayment plan, it asks if your financial situation has changed since you filed taxes. And you can say yes if you have a job change or somebody retired or whatever happened. And then they'll allow you to submit alternate documentation where you would submit like check stubs and things like that. So, yes.
So,
It's okay.
oh, you can go.
So for 9-month faculty, payments that we make during the summer, what happens about those?
It depends on how you are set up in the ULM system for payment for your employment. If you're 9 months, I believe only the 9 months would count. But if somehow, like for example, I think like public school teachers, their payments are divided up over 12 months, even though they only work 9 months. But you're still getting a check for those. So I believe that the 12 months actually counts for those people. So that is something you would want to ask FEDLOAN for sure, though.
On a 9-month faculty, you have to spread out over 12 months, is that what you're asking?
No, I'm saying
just
if
have it
you
over
just
the
do 9 months.
Because you're still 9 months.
You're
Yeah, they
still
just look at
your
your total income.
It depends on what your contract is, though, too.
Summer count.
Because it's when you're employed. So if you're only employed from August to May, you're not employed June, July, and June and July.
Well, that's related to my so because I read up on this stuff a little bit before. So like on the missing information, like 200,000 of those were kicked out because they didn't report income changes within time.
Mm-hmm.
So say I teach a winter session course.
Mm-hmm.
So my income has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to refile a new income-based repayment plan reporting that extra some odd dollars?
No, actually that is because, let me get back to that screen. What it is, where was it at? Okay, okay, I don't remember where it was at. But though that is because people don't resubmit their tax information. Because if you did a winter session class, it's going to show up on your W-2 next year.
Right.
So you're going to be fine.
So I just annually need to update.
But there's a lot of people that will fill out one income-driven repayment plan application and never do it again. So then they don't get recalculated after a year. And so because they're not on an income-driven repayment plan, they don't have a PSLF qualified income-driven repayment plan that they're on to get the PSLF.
Gotcha.
Make sense?
So I only need to update my income basically at that.
Every year, as long as you link your tax information, it's going to cover anything. If you went and mowed yards, it's going to count that theoretically.
Okay.
I think
So I don't need to as soon as my income changes, when I stop working in the summer because I'm not done.
No,
I
it'll be
can
on
go
your
in.
taxes when
Okay.
they link that.
That's great. Because I was worried I'd be money.
Yeah.
So 9 is actually a graduated repayment.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't count the same as an income base.
I don't believe it is unless you're on the repay payment plan. Because I believe the repay is a graduated payment plan. So you may want to just resubmit an application, an income-driven repayment application, and say that you want your payments recalculated.
But to do, so I would have to do that before I could apply for the.
I would do both at the same time. Do the income-driven repayment. You know, you can contact the lender though and ask them which one you're on. I believe most of them, if you have an online account with Navient or whatever, it'll tell you which one you're on. If you go into the payment section, payment detail, I think is what it says. It'll tell you you're on an income-based repayment or you're on an income contingent repayment. It'll tell you that in there. But, or better yet, just call them and ask them, you know, because then you can also ask, does this one count for public service loan forgiveness?
Oh, okay.
So then you get a yes or no on a recorded conversation. So, yes, Dan.
Does my FEDLOAN take the place of Navient? Like if I,
Yes.
okay.
My FEDLOAN, like if you have Navient and you move your loans to FEDLOAN, that's your new servicer for your loan program. So then Navient will have you paid off. Like you'll get a letter from them saying your loans are paid off, but it's because it's paid off by FEDLOAN because that's where you're paying to. Okay. Yes.
So I'm with Navient and need to switch to FEDLOAN. Do I need to go to the income-based repayment before I switch to FEDLOAN? Because I don't have income-based repayment.
I would recommend calling FEDLOAN first because you already get yourself on the radar that you have payments that possibly already qualified for public service loan forgiveness, and don't switch them to FEDLOAN until you find out what steps they need for you to make sure that you don't lose those payments that you've already made. Okay. And then once you are switched to FEDLOAN, they'll notify you that your loans have been transferred, and at that point you can do the income-driven repayment application. Like if they don't have an account number for you, you can't do that anyway.
Okay.
So you have to wait till you have the account number with FEDLOAN before you can fill out income-driven repayment. The public service loan forgiveness, you can fill it out, just FEDLOAN can't do anything with it because they don't have an account number for you. Okay, so what should you do every year? First, make on-time payments every month for 10 years. Complete your recertification for your income-driven repayment plan every year. Like I said, put a reminder on your calendar. And remember, there's two applications here. There's the income-driven repayment plan, and then there's the public service loan forgiveness. And they look almost exactly the same, okay? And then, like I said, make copies before you send them because things get lost, especially if you send it through mail. And like I said, they also have the new option now where you can submit it online. I'm not sure how the employer certification works with that, but at least if you give yourself 30 days advance notice to yourself, you have time to get your employer to sign off on it and still get it in time before you're due to renew. Okay. And then complete your certification form annually to ensure your employer qualifies still, which, I mean, ULM's not going to have that issue, but there are some companies that won't continue to qualify depending on what they're, you know, if they turn into a religious organization or if they're no longer applying as a 501c3, then those, you know, that doesn't count anymore. The ones that when they were a 501c3 counted, but any new ones, if they're not anymore, won't count anymore. Okay, so I know this is really small, but it's hard to get screenshots, but I thought it'd be helpful for you to see. When you get into FEDLOAN and you create an account, actually this turned out better than I thought it would because these screens are so big. There's a borrower tab, and this is what I was saying about the number of qualifying payments. You can keep track of it. If you say view loan detail, you can view the detail. That's what that says. And it says public service loan forgiveness details. Qualifying payments made, 6. Qualifying payments remaining, 114. So as long as you do that PSLF application every year, this gets updated every year. So this is what I was saying about how don't wait for 5 years and then fill out all your employment stuff from 5 years of work, because they can't update this number unless you turn in the form every year. Okay?
And this is at FEDLOAN.org.
This is at myfedloan.org, yes.
So once you're.
And then it tells you the date that they expect if you continue on the track you're on an income-based repayment plan, with recertifying your loan forgiveness and making on-time payments that aren't in default. They expect that this person will have their loan balance forgiven in 2021.
So you will resubmit resubmit the loan forgiveness application every year until the balance is zero? So you're
No,
only getting forgiven one at a
you
time?
would resubmit the public service loan forgiveness form every year for 10 until you don't have any more payments remaining, because there's not going to be a zero balance.
So once you get to 120, then you get approved hopefully for the.
If all of those 120 counted, then at that point you should be able to have any balance that was remaining forgiven, and it's not taxed. Okay? So, I mean, I'm OCD. Actually, I'm CDO. That's OCD alphabetized. So, I call on mine because I want to make sure they got my form, it was filled out correctly, did my employer information check out, and make sure it's all done. And then I make sure it's on my calendar for next year because I want to make sure I don't forget to do something. Because if you forget, you never know. It's not within your control anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Say I meet all the qualifications and I have payments on this and I take out new loans. Could I have two separate or?
So if you've been making payments on a direct loan consolidation loan, you go back to school, make some more or collect more debt, and then your loans, like that's where you might want to continue to keep two separate payments because you don't want to screw up what you've already done. Okay, but that means that the balance on what you've already done can be forgiven, and then you only have your new loan balance to go for 10 years to get that balance forgiven as well. So, like I said, I would call every time, and the phone number's here at the end, and make sure you write down the employee ID number, make sure you ask the right questions, put it in a notebook that you keep with your FSA ID so you can look at it every year and say, I called on January 10th, and they said this. This is the person I spoke to. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying that potentially it's possible to have two different accounts with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because you don't want to lose any payments
Right.
you've already
That's what I'm
made.
worried about.
So the benefit of consolidating is having one payment. But
Right.
it's a bigger benefit to get this stuff forgiven and then worry about this stuff later. Right? You don't want to screw up what you've already done and what you've already worked for. So this is, like I said, this PowerPoint will be on the financial aid website at some point. And then I'll also have the presentation recorded theoretically at the same time on there. So these links will be available. But REPAY, the studentloans.gov REPAY, was that 5-step yes or no thing where you figure out what you need and it tells you exactly what you needed to have and what steps you need to take to do the public service loan forgiveness. Any questions you have? Actually, I looked at the Q&A and it's really good. Very good for government work. On the /public service website, and then all the forms are on there as well. If you have any questions about income-driven repayment plans, studentaid.gov is a good website to go to. If you need to do the income-driven repayment plan, you do that on the studentloans.gov website. You can also just calculate it and see what your payments would look like by going to the repayment estimator link. And on there, you log in with your FSA ID. So it'll actually pull your actual loan balances and the interest rate and everything. And then it gives you the option of, do you want to include your spouse? And then you can put in your spouse's loan debt and be able to look up what your payments will be. And it'll tell you if you're on income-based repayment, this is what your payments would be. And then there's a little switch button that goes back and forth, and you can ask for the PSLF estimate too. And so you can switch that over and it'll tell how much would be forgiven. If you were on an income-based repayment plan, your payments will be $212 for 10 years, and then $38,000 will be forgiven. It'll tell you all that, and it'll do all of them. So it'll have, if you were on income-based repayment, this is what your payments would be. This is your loan forgiveness. If you're on income contingent payment amount, so all of the loan plans will be listed there. So it's a really good calculator to use. And I'm putting this at the very bottom, the nslds.ed.gov, because if you wanted to actually do the calculator, your spouse, like it doesn't pull that in directly, so your spouse would have to log in under nslds.ed.gov to look at their financial aid to see what their loan balance is and their interest rate, so you could actually plug it in correctly on here to be able to see what your payments would be. Yes, ma'am.
So this might be a stretch. Did I hear you say that I can include my husband's student loan? Or that's
Yes, actually, you can
Because my
include
kids are gonna inherit them as they are.
your spouse. You can actually consolidate like payments, like if you're both with FEDLOAN, I believe you can consolidate the payments. But when you do the income-driven repayment plan, they can take into account your spouse's loan debt. So when they're calculating your payments, they're also keeping in mind how much they're paying on their loan debt too. So that will help your payments go down.
Okay.
So like I said, they don't always use the spouse information, but they ask for it anyway. And so provide it. That way, you know, like there's nothing bad that can happen. It just can be good stuff or no, we can't do that. You know, like there's no downside to putting your spouse information on there. You have to do it anyway. It's not like you can exclude their income from your house. So you might as well include their loan debt and their loan payments so that your payments are lower. So together, you're not both paying $500. Maybe you're both paying $300. So, okay.
So in true governmental agency fashion, I've run into the issue of finding an authorized person to sign off on the form. And granted, I did not ask Melissa, I asked someone else in HR, and they said, no, we're not authorized to sign off on that.
Payroll has documentation of when that you are employed as a 12-month employee or a 9-month employee.
Yeah.
So it has to be somebody that is knowledgeable of those things. Honestly, you can ask your supervisor to fill it out. I've had people come to me that didn't really want their supervisor to know their business though.
Yeah.
So, and HR, it's confidential. Like that's,
Yeah.
as an employee, it's confidential. So if you go to them, any employee in HR would be able to look at your date of hire, that you worked full-time all year, and be able to sign off because they have that knowledge. They have to be able to know that, like those things on this form, they have to know your begin date and end date, or that you're still employed. Like if you don't have an end date, make sure that still employed box is checked, because a lot of people turn it in and forget to check still employed. They don't assume that you're still employed. They assume that you fill out the form wrong and then they don't process it.
So
Okay?
that's an incomplete application.
That is an incomplete application, so don't leave it
Every
blank.
single thing right back there.
And they don't even tell you when you did it incomplete. They have to know full-time, part-time hours per week. And so anybody in HR can do that. Your supervisor could do that too. But if you don't want, you know, like some people work in a small office, they don't want everybody hearing about it. So just go to HR. Anybody can do it. I know Melissa's done it for a
I'll
couple
put
of
Melissa
people. So,
as someone else can do it.
okay. I left this one up for a bit on purpose so that you guys could copy those down if you wanted to. And then here is the phone number for FEDLOAN servicing. If you contact them, even if you're not currently a FEDLOAN customer, you just tell them, I am not yet a customer, but I'm looking at public service loan forgiveness. So then they stop typing and trying to find stuff out, and then they'll just sit and answer your questions, okay? They process the employment certification forms, and then they track the payments on that borrower tab on there. And so if you have any questions, you get to talk to a real person. Don't call Monday mornings because you'll have a long wait, and they don't have a way for them to call you back. So you'll actually sit on hold until somebody answers the phone. But they are very helpful there. You know, they're very well versed in what's going on, and so I would contact them directly.
Question.
Yes.
I've made several years of payments using the income-based deal, but I've also made a couple of years of payments where there's a standard repayment. Would any of those be eligible?
Anything made on a standard repayment plan, from what we've been guided with, the guidance we've been given, is no, those do not count. They have to be on a qualifying income-driven repayment plan. Because anything made on a standard 10-year plan, there would not be anything to forgive. So the only, I guess, exception to that is anybody has a plus loan. They have parent plus loan. If your child goes to school and you took out a loan for your child to go to school, plus loans don't have income-driven repayment options. You have a 10-year option. It could be a direct loan, and you could have it consolidated in your direct loans, but at the end of the day, after those 10 years that you've consolidated your debt as a student and your debt as a parent, there's nothing for the parent loan to forgive because there's no way to change those payments. So, yes, unfortunately, those don't happen.
Those are the higher payments.
I mean, I work in financial aid, and it took me a while to figure out that I was misinformed with my own loan debt, because I was told, oh yes, you just need to be on this income-driven repayment plan for 10 years. But they didn't tell me to consolidate, because I went to school back in 2000 through 2003, 2004. So my loans were FELP loans, and they didn't tell me all that time that I was not making, they were just really advising me on how to get done in 25 years. They weren't telling me about the 10-year plan with the tax-free balance. So, and so I guess I should find my own lawyer, huh? So does anybody, I know we've done through here. If you have any questions, you're welcome to give me a call. However, I am just a messenger with the guidance that we're given from FSA, Department of Ed, and FEDLOAN. So most of your questions, you probably should direct directly to them, because, like I said, it's their recorded conversation, their employee number, where if they are misinforming you, then you can have documentation for that. They're not going to care that, well, my financial aid director told me this, okay? They don't care about what I tell you. They care what they told you.
Just to clarify, 9-month employees who are here, only those 9 months count for the pool of 120 payments that you're supposed to pay?
What our guidance is that whatever, you have to be employed, so it depends on your contract. So if your employment contract is August 1 to May 30th, those are in a qualifying position at a qualifying employer. So anything that's not within those dates, any payments made would not count. Because you have to be 120 payments, not in default, working full-time at a qualifying employer. So if you're not employed in January or in June, then you're not in a qualifying employer. I don't know if that's going to change. I don't know if the government will decide, what are we going to do about these people? Because there are a lot of public university employees. I don't know if they're going to change that. But as it is right now, if you're not working outside of, if you're not on contract, like, 12-month employees, we have a contract that goes July 1 to June 30th. So we're covered. But if your contract is not that distance or that amount of time, those payments during those times that aren't covered in your contract wouldn't count.
And it doesn't matter what we do at ULM as long as we get a check from ULM.
As long as you are employed by ULM, no matter if you clean toilets, you put books in the library, doesn't matter what you do. If you teach a class, administrative assistant, whatever you do, doesn't matter. Okay.
On that form where we put weekly hours, if our hours are different, for instance, during the summer, what do we do on that form if it's an annual form?
They usually average it, but I would ask HR, because whatever your contract is on your whatever M form, B form, whatever, that'll tell how many hours they have you on.
Maybe it's like I teach 2 courses in the summer.
Please turn in your evaluation form if you can on your way out, and thank you guys for coming today.